This is the Nike Phantom Lunar in the brand new Thunder Pack. But what this actually is the Nike boot that you haven't given a go yet. And today, I might just convince you to give it a shot. So I like these for a variety of reasons, but I think the main one is the way the upper feels when you make contact with the ball. So it's kind of touch on the ball, but it's a little bit different than that. So what you've got is a grip knit upper, which is technically the same as what you're going to get on the Phantom GX, but in real terms, completely different. Because what they've done is they've taken the grip knit base and they've covered it over with a silicone top layer and added these textured elements, all of these ridges in the main contact areas around the boot. There's nothing wrong with that. There is an argument to be made that essentially you've ruined the best component of grip knit by sticking a silicone coating over it, but we'll not worry about that. What we are worried about is how that affects the touch on the Lunar. So as well as that smoother silicone coating and texturing, you've also got a much more padded liner on the inside. Now, what this does is it just makes the whole upper a little bit more firm, and it means that when you make contact with the ball, it is a firm contact. But because of the way the boot fits, which is very close to your foot, you've got a firm contact with the ball and a one-to-one, very direct touch. It's a fairly unique feeling because you're going direct and one-to-one, and you're not getting a barefoot touch because of that padding. And all three of these elements don't always come together, but in this instance they do as a package and work really nicely. You've obviously got a one-piece mid-cut boot, and I absolutely adore this collar. I'm not a huge person for collared boots, but this might actually be my favorite DF collar that Nike have ever created. It just comes up the perfect amount. Now that runs down into this kind of new style heel counter that Nike have been doing. Now look how soft that is. It basically bends in on itself, but that is deliberate. It's idea to take away pressure points, reduce any kind of heel problems, and still give you great heel lockdown by building the counter up a little bit around the sides. Now, I like it. I think it really works on the Lunar, and I think it works better on the Lunar than it does on the GX, despite the fact that I think the heel counter on both is actually the same. We're talking about the heel, we might as well talk about the lockdown. Heel lockdown, very good, very impressed, no problems at all. And lockdown overall is good. You've got a really deep lacing system, which I like a lot. The one-piece upper obviously helps, and overall, lockdown is just very, very positive. It's not the greatest lockdown I've ever felt in a boot, but it is very good and I have no complaints. A lot of the benefit actually comes from how the boot is shaped. Now, it is supposedly designed more for a woman's foot, but I honestly think that it doesn't really matter. If you're a man, woman, it's not really going to make any difference to you at all, unless you have particularly wide feet. If you have particularly wide feet, don't go near this. I don't think you're going to get much hope, much joy out of the Phantom Lunar. But in Nike's efforts to provide a more feminine-friendly shaped boot, what they've actually created is probably one of the most foot-shaped boots I've come across recently, and it really does follow the shape and curvature of your feet. It really kind of molds to them. I want to use the word vacuum, but that's wrong. It doesn't vacuum to them. There's just not a lot of space inside this boot, but it's flexible enough with the padding that's on the inside to really shape around your foot. You feel very, very supported in this. Now, there is a fine line, and it could depend on your foot type. There's a fine line between, oh, this boot is beautifully close and I feel one-to-one with everything about this boot, and dear God, get it off me, this boot is suffocating my feet. Which is how I felt when I very first put them on. When I got this pair, this was the pair I've actually been testing. When I first put these on, I was like, oh, too tight. Give them a little bit and they're absolutely fine. So that close fit and the highly structured upper that I spoke about earlier also means that the upper feels very, very responsive. However, the outsole is potentially not the most responsive thing that I've ever come across. It's not terrible, but it's pretty flexy. Now, this isn't nearly as flexible as people made me believe before I bought them. But I think the issue is that it's a fairly, again, it's a thick, a substantial sole plate, and that leads to having quite a stiff forefoot, but usually a stiff forefoot leads to amazing spring back. It's not actually what you get here. It just feels a little bit overly stiff for me, and then the midfoot is thick without being overly rigid. So in actual fact, it ends up being a little bit flexible. Now, this isn't a deal breaker, and it's similar enough to what Nike have done with the GX sole plate. So if you're looking for a hyper-responsive, hyper-aggressive outsole, this probably isn't for you, but it absolutely has its place and has its perks. The outsole, particularly the stud pattern, and particularly this forefoot area here, is where Nike have really tried to market this to the female athlete with their Cyclone 360 technology, which is basically this rotation of bladed studs in the forefoot here. The idea being that it wants to reduce injury by allowing these studs to release from the turf quicker while still giving you the option of great rotational movement. Now, the initial argument is choose conical studs, but that obviously wasn't what they're going for here, and obviously this looks like a gimmick. This has gimmick plastered all over it. This isn't going to work. Apart from it does, the situation is that these allow you to release from the turf very quickly, but the trade-off there is that if you were to compare them to, for example, a Mercurial, they're not as aggressive, but they are more aggressive than a conical stud. So it's a cool idea. I like it. I don't think it's revolutionary or groundbreaking, but it's nice to see Nike put effort into trying to combat what is genuinely a huge issue in the women's game. Remember to like the video and get subscribed to Boot Wizard. We'll swing back to the fit for a minute to talk about sizing, and the midfoot is quite narrow. This kind of forefoot area is actually reasonably wide, and if you have a wider forefoot, you'd probably get away with it, provided your midfoot isn't too narrow. And then the toe box is actually a little bit pinched, which may cause some issues for anybody who has particularly wide toe kind of spread. But on the whole, very nice, and like I say, really well suited to a foot, which shouldn't be something I'd have to say about a football boot, but this is really well shaped to a foot. The laces pushed across to the medial side actually helps that shape, in my opinion. It may not be the most logical thing to do to push your laces across to the medial side, where you might want a cleaner striking surface, but in terms of shape of the boot, that actually really works. And then it's not a bad thing to have this bigger, cleaner surface on the lateral side just for dribbling, basically. Now, if you have the Phantom GX, you will know that out of the box, these run a little bit long, say quarter of a size. The Luna also runs slightly long, in my opinion, but it is less than a quarter of a size. So in terms of sizing advice, go and get the size that you would normally buy in a modern Nike boot. I am a US 8 in pretty much the entire current Nike range. Wherever you are in the current Nike range, buy that in the Luna. If you are looking to buy them, please do hit the link down in the top pinned comment or in the description, because it does help the channel and it doesn't affect how you buy boots at all, and it's what keeps us running. We would really appreciate it. Thank you very much. These might not objectively be the best boot in Nike's lineup, but I certainly think there's a place for them. Have I convinced you to give them a go?